And the red eye is kind of like wearing an eye patch and only seeing the world or your world through one perspective. And again, I was in a coach's workshop and this guy was up there talking about we're all being self-deceived. We're all seeing the world from one point of view. And I was like, oh, okay, how's this work? And then he started to give an example which hit home so hard, I almost fell off my seat. And so the example goes something like this. I was working as a regional manager and I had to travel everywhere for days on end, a few nights away. And at this time I'd been away for 3 days and I'd come home and I had about a 6 to 7 hour window to get some sleep before I was off again the next day on another 2-day conference I was organising. And so I come home, quickly say hi to all the kids and my darling, and jump into bed, get some sleep. And a few hours later we hear our second child crying. And I'm lying in bed and my initial thought was, get up, obviously. But then I said to myself, actually, I'm the one working. My job enabled my darling to be at home and look after the kids, which is what we both wanted. So it's her job to get up. And so then I started to justify that decision. I started to say to myself, I'm hard working. If it wasn't for this job, she wouldn't be able to stay at home. I'm so busy. I've just been away for 3 days and now I've got to get up early in the morning. So I started to really justify my situation. And I'm fair. I'm fair. I do my part of the chores and whatnot when it's my turn. And what happens next is the fascinating part of what we call the red eye, or in scientific terms, it's called the reticular activating system. What it does is it collects evidence to support that story, to support why I was hardworking in fear, and to support the story in my head that I started to say, which was, man, she's lazy because she still hasn't got up. Man, she is inconsiderate. Doesn't she know I've got to get up early in the morning? And so, long story short, she did get up, and I woke up in the morning a few hours later, dragged myself to the shower, and then I got in the shower. I saw all the clothes from yesterday on the floor, her clothes, the kids' clothes, and my thought was like, man, she's lazy and inconsiderate, because now I have to pick that up and put that in the wash. It was my red eye, or reticular activating system, collecting evidence to support my initial story. Then I got into the spare room, started to change, and I tried to look for my clothes, and it was this massive pile of washing that hadn't been sorted or just lying there, and I had to sort through it. I couldn't find my stuff. What was my thought? Well, the evidence that I was collecting was, man, she's lazy and inconsiderate. Then I went into the kitchen to have breakfast, and there was dishes everywhere. And my first thought was, man, she's lazy and inconsiderate. And so our red eye was collecting evidence to support my story that I had made up about it. Rewind 14 years earlier, when we had first met, the story that I had on my darling was, she's amazing. I saw her walk into university and I was like, she's the one. Everything she did, it was like walking on water. And so my red eye and reticular activating system would just collect evidence to support this. The way she ran on the touch field, the way she passed that ball, the way she answered questions in university lectures was like, she is amazing. And so it supported my story by gathering evidence out there. Because my story changed from being amazing and walking on water to being lazy and inconsiderate, my red eye collected evidence daily to support my new story, which then affects my behavior towards her. This is emotional interference that is causing us to behave differently. So, what the red eye causes us to do is to create a story around someone or something. And we collect evidence every day, any chance we can get, to support that story and make it even stronger, so strong that it becomes our belief about that person or event. Okay, so what does this mean now? We have got an RAS that collects evidence, and when we're looking at others, other people, I want you to pull out those 3 people that cause you the most stress or that F you off right now. And you're going to go through an activity, get the worksheet below, and you're going to start identifying what the event was, what was the situation, and what's the story and belief you have about that person. So a quick example for me around my brother was, twin brother, is that I always had this sense and feeling that he was selfish. Like he always, like that was my belief and that was my story. And so whenever we'd pick up the phone or wherever we'd hang out, my RAS would be picking up evidence to support that story. And so one example was we had to get some documents signed for a house, the buying of a house, and I kind of put everything on hold to go and do this, sign it and get it off to him. He was driving up to North Island and I had organised a stop-off point in Taihape for him to pick it up, print it out, sign it, and the guy would scan it back to us. And he rang me up on the way up. He said, "Oh, look, I'm just too busy. I need to get through there. I need to get to wherever he was going." And in my head, I was like, "See, selfish." And so I just went off. I went off on him. Anyway, what is the story and belief you have about someone? How are you then making yourself right or justifying your position? Okay, make a whole list. Is it because you're working hard? Is it because you're fair like I had with my darling? Write it all down. Then also jot down how you are finding fault for them. And just quickly remember, where is finding fault on above or below the line model? It's below the line. So, where are you finding fault for them? Oh, look, he's selfish. He always does things for himself, was my thought for my brother. I always do more for the family. There's another way of finding fault. I'm always the one who's doing more. What was another one? Oh, he's always last to ask or to offer. So list down all the ways you're finding fault about those 3 people that you've chosen. And then at the end of that, bring that together and go, so how is my RAS collecting evidence to support this story and belief about this person? And list down, oh, when I was at the party, I saw him do this or saw them do that. When we spoke on the phone, they said this. I heard through so-and-so that they were doing this. That's all evidence that your RAS is picking up to support your belief. Now, a couple of things. We are really good as human beings, especially as parents or coaches, of just always picking up the faults. And we just pick it naturally. And David Galbraith, the psychologist, performance coach for the Chiefs and the Sevens and a whole lot of Olympic athletes, he calls this, we are so good at picking up the mosses, the moments of shit. We'd walk into a training or as a parent, we're always picking up the moments of shit that our kids do. Oh, clean that up. Oh, do that, do this. We just pull them apart. We rock into a rugby team. We say, oh, they're going to do that right, they're going to do that better. We pick up moments of shit. And our RAS is just conditioned this way. He says that we need to be more focused and actively conscious of picking up the MOPs, MOPs, which is moments of perfection. What are the people doing right? What are my kids doing right? What is that team doing right? What is that athlete doing right? What are those 3 people on the list doing right? And why does the RAS collect evidence? Or why the RAS collects evidence to support our belief in our story is because, remember, what's the role of the brain? Is to protect ourselves, is to preserve us. And so we've got this belief. It supports the belief because if we're wrong, then we're judged, or we don't want to be judged. We have fear of being ashamed. And so the RAS protects us by collecting evidence to support our belief. Because, geez, don't be wrong. Because if we're wrong, we don't want to be judged. don't want to feel ashamed for being wrong. We don't want to put ourselves out there because it's scary. It's dangerous. It's a threat. It's a threat to our life. So our RAS will protect us by collecting evidence to support that story and belief, even if it is wrong. That's what knocked me over. Now, how does this affect our health and well-being, our eating? Well, let me ask you, what is your belief around eating? And where did that come from? What story affected that belief or created that belief? So for me, my belief initially around eating was you got to eat everything off your plate. If you gave me something in front of me, it would be gone. And that belief came from the story or the events. When I was young, my grandmother used to say, eat everything off your plate, you can't leave the table until you've done so. And that was repeated day after day, meal after meal. I remember as a young kid sitting there while everyone else had gone until the vegetables had to be eaten. And so this belief was created, and my red eye started to collect evidence to support that belief. And an example of this was I would notice when others around the table would get acknowledged for eating everything off their plate, you know. So if we could be at someone else's house and the cook would say, oh, well done, or the auntie would say, oh, well done for eating everything so-and-so. And I would tune into that and then go, I need to eat everything. See, I need to eat everything off my plate. So where does that leave us now? Well, I had this overeating problem. I knew I wasn't hungry. I knew I didn't need it. My puku was full. And my mind was trying to say, don't need to finish it, you don't need to eat it. But my body was on automatic, you know, it had this habit that it did better than the mind, and it just went for the food and it was just shoveling it in the mouth, shoveling it in. And my mind was saying, we don't need it, you're full. And then what would I do afterwards? I'd be, oh, I'm so full. That was the story of my life. And so what belief and stories do you have around eating? More importantly, what are some of your beliefs around things like relationships, exercise, work? What are your beliefs around finances? So where did these stories come from that helped you create the beliefs you've got around not just eating, exercise or well-being, but all your other areas of life? Where did those stories come from? You're going to have to look back and reflect and just have a time and sit, get off your phone, and just think about the memories that come up when you ask yourself. You know, one of the original psychologists, Carl Jung, talks about until we make the unconscious conscious, the unconscious will just dictate our life and we will call it fate. And that's exactly what I did with my eating. My habits and my unconscious automatic habits were dictating my life, and I would just say, that's what's meant to be. Same wherever else I look, with family and friends, they all do it. Must be the way it is.